Ukraine's relations with its neighbors have always been intense and sometimes complicated. This is the reality of historical processes involving those who care about their past, let alone their future. Political and social circles, diplomatic games, business or even personal interests have been influencing relations between both countries and their citizens for centuries. This is the Ukraine Neighbors Points of Contact podcast, and here we are looking for commonalities in the relations between us and our neighboring countries. Ukraine, Poland. Offense impossible to love.
For centuries, Ukraine has been gaining, fighting for, and dreaming of its own state. And it has repeatedly faced opposing interests of neighbor states over the centuries. In particular, those of Poland. In the mind of citizens, the continuity of the historical process often comes down to the memory of the most vivid and painful episodes. And behind them, commonalities can be lost. Pavlo Klimkin, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine in 2014-2019, sees historical commonality as both a strength and weakness in building relations between Ukraine and Poland.
У нас 1000 років спільної історії.
We have 1,000 years of common history, and it's not really a simple history. I always tell everyone that the Poles could have changed the course of history when we proposed that Ukrainians should have the same status in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth as Poles and Lithuanians. Then the history of Central Europe would have taken a completely different path. This is not the only missed opportunity and not the only tragic page in our history. But I believe that we have recently studied our history quite well, and we can conduct this dialogue, telling them how this history developed and where it led.
Куди вона призвела?
Today, Poland has a chance to influence the future of Europe if it is cooperating effectively with Ukraine and contributes to its early accession of the European Union. Given the voting algorithm in European institutions where the number of votes is calculated according to the population in each member state, Ukrainians will become an important strengthening of the position of Eastern European countries. And Poland, having lost its status as a border country in the European Union and formed a strong coalition of Eastern European states, will increase its authority, and thus it will be able to influence important decisions and financial issues. For this, a lot can be forgiven. Jan Pieklo, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Poland to Ukraine in 2016-2019, also emphasizes the special brotherhood that is able to forgive and analyze for the sake of success and democratic European commonalities.
Нам треба просто континуувати.
We need to preserve what has been built before. We need to develop cooperation between cities. Assistance from Polish partner cities comes to Ukraine. We just need to do what we have been doing. But we understand that the war complicates these processes. It is not even politicians who are doing this, but ordinary people. Politicians can say different things. They sometimes have different opinions. But ordinary Poles and Ukrainians are brothers. And I know that both Poland and Ukraine understand this. Sharp corners.
The Poles are unwavering in their respect for Ukraine's sovereignty. There nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine also has an absolutely clear basis. Throughout its history, Poland has repeatedly been in a situation where its territory was divided, transferred, given away, and demarcated, and the opinion of Poles themselves were not taken into account in these processes. That is why Poland has true respect for international law and strongly condemns violations of the legally recognized world order. Ukrainian history has been no less ruthless. Historical commonality will provide the basis for further successful development. Pavlo Klimkin is convinced. However, for this to happen, both peoples must perceive historical realities as an integral part of themselves without excessive emotions and with respect for their neighbor.
Ми просто маємо з ними говорити з позиції спокійної.
We just need to talk to them from the position of calm Ukrainian strength. We are very emotional and we have power, but it is usually agitated. I believe that this is important to have self-confidence, to understand that this is our history, no matter what it is, tragic, heroic, whatever, it is ours. And we have to accept it, and they have to accept it as well. But we must not be irritated by some things that come from them, and not draw complex political circles around it. We need history schools, and by the way, we have them now. Now there are very decent historical studies in Kyiv, in Lviv, and in Ivano-Frankivsk. There are many things to talk about. There are conferences in which you really want to speak and participate. That is, we have an intellectual discussion, but Polish politicians will still use it, and we have to respond not emotionally, but calmly, again, from a position of calm strength.
Відповідати не емоційно, але спокійно, знову-таки з позиції спокійної сили.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Until February 2022, the leading topics in the Ukrainian media in the context of relations between Ukraine and Poland were history and controversies over it. However, the emphasis shifted after the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and Polish media, like the other world media, gave the topic of the war their front pages. Therefore, the media's information work has been complicated by a special task to conquer Russian propaganda and professionally debunk enemy fakes. And there are quite a few of them, and the fight against them must be carried out on both sides, says Dariusz Materniak, editor-in-chief of the Polish-Ukrainian portal Pol-Ukrnet.
Вся ця діяльність, яку можна назвати
All this activity that can be called propaganda or disinformation in Polish-Ukrainian relations, it happens every day if you look at some media, social networks. It is not accidental and has in fact its influence. The fact that this is actually happening and that Russia is actually engaged in such activities should be taken seriously. That it exists has an impact and poses a threat to us.
що це насправді є загроза для наших вільностей.
Jan Pieklo also speaks about the threats of Russia's psyops, psychological operations and propaganda.
Також правда, що російська агентура старається вийти.
But it is also true that Russian agents are trying to get into all the cracks. And the historical gap is not exception. We need to keep an eye on these things. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who want to promote Russian propaganda. But some people spread it not because they are agents themselves, but because they foolishly believe and buy into what Russian agents broadcast.
Купують то, що там говорить російська агентура.
The diplomat talks about another leverage that Russia unfortunately successfully uses to drive a wedge between Ukrainian and Poles and throughout quarrels to weaken support of Ukraine in the war, which is an economic leverage. The analyst monitored several Ukrainian media outlets, including Ukrainska Pravda, Західний, and Ukrinform. They analyzed how journalists wrote about Ukrainian-Polish issues. It shows that last year the main topics were the blocking of the Polish-Ukrainian border, Polish military and humanitarian aid, and stories about the lives of Ukrainian refugees in Poland. The Ukrainian-Polish disputes and the elections in Poland were also covered. However, experts believe that economic relations are perhaps the most stable and convincing argument for cooperation and understanding between Ukrainians and Poles. All countries are interested in developing their economies, and doing so together is more profitable, says Vitaly Dyachuk, an analyst at the Institute for Central European Strategy and the Reopen Ukraine project.
Перше, у нас є спільна якась історична пам'ять, ми всі знаємо, що таке.
We have a historical memory and we all know what a common enemy is, who captured and destroyed our lands before and now, basically, has returned under a different guise and threatens not only to destroy Ukraine but also has plans for other states. This has already been said, if not openly then violently, more than once. And our neighbors actually probably realize this, but not completely. And then we see our relations changing to more pragmatic ones. That is, some economic aspect of all this is taken into account. Our neighbors are also interested in developing their own economies, and the war, no matter how unfortunate it may sound, is a rather important intensive for economic development, because it attracts new labor, it attracts investments in the defense sector. Poland, for example, has a chance to become one of the leaders in the defense sector of the European Union and to take on the role of such a leader. This will even be a kind of trump card for Poland in building the European Union's relations with the United States.
Стосунки Європейського Союзу зі Сполученими Штатами Америки.
History values, security and economic synergy are the factors that unite Ukrainians and Poles. And these are also the areas where the common enemy is trying their hardest to divide us. In the next episode of the podcast, we will talk more about this.
Seeking understanding and not hitting sore spots is an important skill for those who are responsible neighbors. This is the Ukraine Neighbors Points of Contact podcast, a project to find commonalities in Ukraine's relations with its neighboring countries. The podcast was created with the financial and organizational support of the Gайnrіха Bьолля Foundation, Kyiv Office, Ukraine.